My name is Maureen Spataro, and I live in New Jersey. And on the morning of 9/11, I'm sure, like everybody else, it just started as a beautiful day. My daughter was in elementary school at the time, and my ex-husband and I had the TV on and were watching the news when it came across that a plane had hit one of the towers. And we kind of looked at each other and looked at the TV because the day was absolutely stunning. And we thought, how could that happen? So, of course, we thought, well, maybe the pilot had a heart attack, never imagining that it was a passenger plane. So, of course, we sat down and were listening and trying to get as much information, which at that moment, there really wasn't a lot. It was just kind of the shock of, oh my gosh, one of the towers is burning. And it crossed my mind that my mom worked just a few blocks away from there. So I called her up on the phone and I said to her, Ma, do you know what's going on down there? And she said, no, what are you talking about? And I said, a plane just hit one of the Twin Towers. And she said, oh my gosh. She said, you know, Maureen, the building shook when I first came in. She said, and I stopped for a second, and then I thought, that must have been a huge truck that just came down Broadway. But she had no windows facing the towers. So she said she just went back to work and then got the call from me. And as her and I were on the phone, she was telling her coworkers what had happened. And I could hear kind of like the responses in the background. And my husband said, Maureen, and I turned around and looked at the screen and I saw the replay of the second plane hitting the second tower. And my husband, who had been retired Navy, looked at me and he said, this isn't an accident. I'm telling you, we're being attacked. And I had my mother on the phone. And you know, when something like that happens, you become a child again. And I went, Mommy, please. I think we're under attack. I don't think this was an accident. Please get out of the city now. Do whatever you have to do. And I remember her voice being so calm. And she went, okay, don't worry about it. I'm sure I can find a bus or a taxi. I'll be able to get out. And I just could feel myself now screaming, no, you have to get out now, right now, whatever it takes, just get out. And the phone went dead. And I tried to call her back. And at that point, all the lines were starting to get jammed. So from my perspective, I just kind of stood there staring at the TV and I started to cry. And then I kind of sucked it back in. And I said to my husband, I'm going to the school. I was the PTA president, newly elected. And I said, I'm going to go to the school. They probably need help. And I kind of just went numb. And I drove to the school and cars were everywhere. There were cars in the middle of the street. Now, this is suburban Freehold, New Jersey, and people were literally running into the school. So I made my way in and I went into the office and one of the women looked at me. She's like, we'll get her in a little while. And I said, no, I'm not here to take her out. I want to help. What do you need? And she said, thank you so much. And they started to give me a list with classrooms of children to pull out to give to their parents. And a couple of times I had to go into my daughter's room and she looked at me, she was only in second grade. And I went, no, because in my mind, in that moment, and I said it to her teacher, this is the last moment of innocence my daughter is ever gonna have before she realizes that the world is much bigger than Freehold, New Jersey. She will stay in school, she will go to lunch, she will go out to play because there's nothing else that I can give her. But as you recall, planes were crashing in Pennsylvania. The Pentagon was being hit. So parents were thinking planes are falling from the sky. So as I'm going through that, what I found out was my mother was in the building. She was afraid to leave, but then she could start to smell smoke. And she said at that point, people in her office had cleared out. And she was not sure if she should stay or if she should go. But when she started to smell the smoke, she said, you know what? I'm not going down like this. So she went down the elevator and she said, she stepped outside the door and she made a left and got hit with a huge plume of smoke. And one of the towers had actually gone down and she didn't know it. And she said that she was feeling her way along a wall, and if there were other people, she couldn't see anything. She said that she was very, very close to a window and kind of glanced in it and realized that she was covered from head to toe in soot. And she said she started to cry because she thought, they're all dead and this isn't just soot. And she said that she truly felt she was going to die. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't see. And as she felt her way around, she was trying to get toward Trinity Church because she said, if I got there, I would know where I was. And she looked up, and in the distance was a figure. And as she got closer, she realized it was a police officer. And he was yelling to her, are you okay? Are you okay? And she was shaking her head, she said, but she couldn't say anything. So he gave her a bottle of water. And she swallowed it, and he grabbed her and he said, okay, I want you to keep walking to the water. Just go to the water and there'll be help for you there. And he got her to the corner and turned her in that direction. And she said she walked to the water, and there were fleets of boats there at that point. She said, and the captains of all of the, she said that there were small boats, tugboats. She said that it looked like yachts. She said there were just boats everywhere, and people were calling out, are you going to New Jersey? Are you going here? She said, and she heard a gentleman say, are you going to Brooklyn? If you're going to Brooklyn, come here. And she walked over to him. And she said that he looked down at her, all covered. And he said to her, are you going to Brooklyn, sweetie? And she said, yeah, I just want to go home. And he lifted her up and placed her in his boat and sat her down. And he said, I got anything you need. If you need a good drink, I got something for a good drink. If you need water. And she said, no, I just want to go home. And she walked to the front, and she said she was passing some people, most of them covered in soot, and people were bleeding, people were injured, people were crying. And she said once the boat was filled enough and we were all going to the pier in Brooklyn, she said as the boat pulled away, she said none of them spoke. They all just sat there looking at the skyline and watching it burn. She said that they got to the pier in Brooklyn, but they couldn't get close enough. So they had to literally get a ladder. There were ambulances, there were firefighters, there were police officers waiting at the pier. And they put a ladder from the pier to the boat. They were standing and holding down the ladder, and one by one they had to climb from the boat over the water onto the pier. And she said when she got off the boat, they asked her, are you okay? They wanted to put her in an ambulance, and she said she just looked at them, said no, and walked all the way home, which took her about an hour. And she said the thing that struck her was that as she walked through Bay Ridge heading toward Bensonhurst, she said, life was just going on. She said, I knew what I looked like. I knew, like, do you not know what just happened? And people were shopping and people were walking on the avenue and life was just going on. And she said, I felt like a ghost. I felt like I was invisible. She said, I just kept walking straight. She said, if people were staring at me, I never noticed. I didn't want to get on a bus. I didn't want to get anything until she got all the way home. And both of my brothers were also in the city. And it just so happened that my brother was able to get home about a half hour after her. And she said, when he walked in, he just looked at her and he said, are you okay? And she said, I don't want to talk about it. And he was smart enough, to just walk up to her and give her a hug. And she said, I just kept screaming at him. Nobody understands that they're all dead. They all died, and nobody knows what happened over there. How are people just living? And I mean, I spent the rest of the day at the school and explaining to my daughter what happened, and I brought her home, but I sat for all those hours waiting for all three of them. Please call. Please call, because I know I was afraid. What if there were other things going on in the city that people didn't know? If we really were under attack, were there other people that were planted in the city that were looking to just hurt people? And when they finally called late that night, I realized that we were the lucky ones because all three of my family members came home. All three of my family members came home. But as you said, it would take 17 years. And we find ourselves now with my mother, who has stage 4 kidney cancer and had it confirmed that it is a 9/11 related cancer. And she's a warrior. She's had it for 5 years. They gave her 6 months, and she's here 5 years later because she said she'll let cancer know when she's ready to go. But I will tell you, Shelley, she never told us that story. She didn't tell us that story until she was diagnosed. And even though it was 16 or 17 years later, that pain, that moment of me being on the phone with her and begging her to get out, it all came back. And I think that's when I realized we're going to be affected by this forever, because people are dying every day from this. And you know, we watched 3,000 firefighters die. We watched police officers, innocent people die on that day. But this moment is going to last forever, for generations to come. So I'm grateful that you're telling these stories, because I know many people who are living with 9/11 cancer. And it's kind of like the second wave. And it's a wound that never heals.
And there are 500,000 people who are at risk. And even if they're not sick now, they can get sick in the future.
Absolutely.
But they need to now think back, who can I get 2 signed affidavits with to prove that I was here in case they're not here in the future, and in case you, if you're listening to this, get sick, because you will be taken care of. You will be part of the free healthcare from the World Trade Center healthcare program, which is in all 50 states, and you will be able to get compensation from the Victim Compensation Board. So this is why we're urging people, even if you're not sick now, protect yourself and get the signed affidavits to prove that you were there. Your brothers how close were they working?
My brother was a few blocks. He still works for Verizon. My other brother, thankfully, was uptown. No, I'm sorry, not uptown. He was in Midtown. And I did get to call him, and I said to him, do you know what's going on? And he said, no, what's going on? I said, the towers have been hit. You need to leave. You need to get out right now. And he said, I'm going. Like, he didn't even hesitate. He said, I'm going. And he said that when he went downstairs, people were just pouring out of buildings. He was one of the people who literally walked from Midtown Manhattan all the way to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. It took him hours. And he said as they crossed the bridges, they just could look back. As he got to Brooklyn, he said, I turned around and I just stood there, and he thought the same thing. Where's my mother? Where's my brother? You know, what happened to all those poor people that just got up and went to work that day? You know, and I want to tell you, I want to thank you, because the 9/11 fund and the people that are associated with that, my mom reached out to them finally, and she said that they made the process so easy for her. And every person she spoke to, the lawyer that was assigned to her, was so caring. She said they made you feel like they understood that this terrible thing has happened to you and you've lived through this terrible moment. She said, and even all these years later, they were so respectful and so helpful, and made the process so easy, and never, ever, ever. She said, I never had to make a call back to them. They kept her updated. They kept her going along. They told her exactly what she needed. And when she didn't think she could get it, they told her how to try to get it. So I want to tell you that the work that you're doing and the work that these people are doing is invaluable, because to have to go back and live through this day is so painful for people that they just don't know. And they have to get documents, and they have, like you said, they have to find people to, yes, you really were there working that day. And she said what could have been a process that she could have easily walked away from was made so easy. And she just felt like she was treated with such respect and such care and empathy. And I hope people do. I hope they understand they can still get help for this, because my mom's treatments are 5 years now. And, you know, to know that there are people out there who still know and still want to help, it's invaluable. It's precious. It's precious.
Is your other brother okay, who was nearby? How's his health?
So far, so good, but he does get tested every single year. He has to go for a checkup, a complete and total checkup and tests every single year. Hopefully, you know, he stays that way.
Did he sign up with the Victim Compensation Fund? Because he should.
You know what? I don't think that he did, and I'm going to tell him that he should, because I think something that maybe people don't understand, because I didn't understand it until you just said it. Whether or not you have been diagnosed, you should sign up with this. So I'm going to say that I don't think that my brother has, that he just gets tested every year. And now again, because of you and your efforts, I'm going to tell him, do it anyway. Do it.
And get the witnesses that will prove that he was here, just in case, God forbid, he gets sick in the future, because this fund is in place for our lifetime, for 70 years. And we just don't know what lies ahead. Did your mom also have, I mean, she didn't talk about it all those years.
She did it.
Did she have post-traumatic stress? And if so, how did that show itself?
My mom is old school. You know, you take things and you bury them. It happened, we move on. We don't discuss it. And it, like I said, it wasn't until she was diagnosed. My mom's takeaway from that day was, I lived. And you know what? I'm going to live. I'm going to enjoy my children. I'm going to enjoy my grandchildren. She started traveling, which she had never done before. She decided, I now have seen that a person can get up and just go to work and never go home to their family again. And I'm going to make sure every day that I live. It didn't really truly become post-traumatic until she had cancer. And I remembered us looking at the doctor when he said she had stage 4 kidney cancer, and we all kind of looked at each other like, how did that happen? You know, with kidney cancer, where did that come from? And my mother never said anything. And she said that that's when she knew she was going to go and get tested, because it was the only connection that she could make. And she told us nothing until the case was opened. And then she sat us down, and once she had the confirmation that it was 9/11 related, that was when she told us the whole story. I naively thought that my mother found a boat, got on it, docked, and walked home. I had no idea my mother was one of those people who was covered in all of that, who was choking. And all these years later, when I think of that, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to know that she lived through that and how she kept it a secret all those years. And she said, I just lived. And now that I have cancer, I'm just going to live. And when I'm done and when I'm too tired, I'll let cancer know. But she said, I live because all those people couldn't. And I live for my family because I could have been lost. And that's just how she deals with that trauma. And once she gave her statement, and when she told me so that I could tell you her story, she said to me, I'm never going to speak of it again. I'll never speak of it again. I just want to keep living. And I know people deal with things in different ways, but for her, that's the only way to deal with it. Because to go back to that day is too painful. And not for her, not because of what she went through, but because of all the people that she knows died. She just can't handle it. She can't process it.
What people sometimes don't realize is that 68 cancers are scientifically linked to the toxins. So basically, all you have to prove is that you were there that day or spend time below Canal Street in the 8 months after. If you had a cancer over the last 17 or so years and you were there, that's it. You get your free health care for life in all 50 states, and you file for your compensation from the Victim Compensation Fund. Let me just ask you, Maureen, one more question. How
Yeah.
has your life changed as a result of all of this?
Well, certainly with my mother being diagnosed, it turned all of our lives upside down because the initial diagnosis was, and we could see how rapidly she was getting sick. It didn't even look like we would have her for 6 months. Um, Thankfully, she was put on a protocol, an immunotherapy that she responded to instantly. And she came back to us and continued to live her life. But quite honestly, there were very few moments when I hug her or I talk to her that I don't think of that moment when I yelled at her to get out. And I went a long time just putting that day aside. For me, it's always been a bit of a sacred day because I worked at the towers years ago. So every time 9/11 rolls around, I am the person who would take the day off, who would sit, who would listen to the names, look at the pictures, cry, say a prayer, because I felt like you can never forget. Now, I think now at least once a week, I have that moment when I think about those people and I think about the families that are still going through it, because I feel like my mother is a walking piece of history. And when I hug her and when I see her and when we're all gathered together, because my brother had to go back to Verizon and clean up. So he was there. He was there 2 or 3 days after this all happened and spent days down there. So when we sit around a table, I just kind of look at my family and I feel like somehow we've been blessed to still be here together. And it's just never lost on me now. Everything, every moment is precious with my mother. And whether my brothers know it or not, I have many moments when I look at them and I think every moment with my family is precious because so many families did not get this. They don't get this. And I want to thank you because people should never, ever forget this. Never.
Thank you, Maureen.